When I returned to Mexico in 2019 after closing out my life in Baltimore, I was leaving behind a lot. My home, my friends, my work, and the country that had shaped my purpose. But when that plane took off from Baltimore Washington International Airport, I was praying that I was leaving behind something else, something that had marked my entire life. Solitude. There is something about me that makes other people feel like they need to do something about me. Beginning in kindergarten, I was bullied mercilessly. It got so bad in elementary school that I was actually allowed to leave at 2:45 p.m. so I had time to get home safely before the rest of the school was let out at 3 o'clock. As a teenager, I had to literally fight my way out of some life-threatening situations more than once, some of which had been actually arranged by people that I trusted. It wasn't until I went to the School of Performing Arts that thing about me was recognized and embraced and allowed to breathe and was nurtured and was appreciated. Those 4 years, I was more myself than I had ever been in my life, and in some ways, more myself than I have ever been since. I took all of that fullness with me to Howard University in Washington, D.C., where my freshman dorm assignment was in a one-bedroom apartment with 2 other women from the Deep South, one of whom was a bully. That thing was in full effect. In fact, by the end of my sophomore year, I had moved off campus into an apartment alone. That thing followed me into womanhood and shaped both my personal and my professional life. I'm fairly pretty, okay, but I didn't date. And I once asked this brother why men didn't approach me. And he said it was because they take one look in my eyes and know that none of the crap that they want to pull is going to work on me. I spent most of my time in solitude, and there was a period of quiet despair. Oddly enough, it was a movie that pulled me out of that. Reminding me that the most important thing is to be my authentic self. By 1986, my study of classical African history was transforming me, and that thing became an asset as I taught cultural empowerment. By 2015, my understanding of classical African philosophy was transforming me, and that thing became an asset because I was teaching personal empowerment. But now it was 2019, and I was leaving the work behind. And as I stepped out of the airport in Puerto Vallarta, as I sensed that absence and possibility that I told you about, I declared that it meant that I would find peace. I declared that I would belong. That which is for you cannot be kept from you as long as you move in alignment with who you are and what you intend. That which is not for you will never be granted to you, no matter your alignment with self or intention. I was about to discover which of these two truths would define my life in Mexico. My apartment was on the 6th floor of a condo building in the colonia called Versalles. I would wake up to the sound of birds in the palm trees and roosters crowing in the distance. I would sit on my balcony and watch the sun come up over the Sierra Madre Mountains. Every morning, the light would move across them differently. At night, I would sit with my wine and watch the day depart. I was still working hard every day as an investigator, but I could stop in the middle of the afternoon and take a dip in the pool. I could walk everywhere I needed to. The car was completely unnecessary, and if it was necessary, the Ubers were like a few dollars, almost no matter where you went. This was not Baltimore. There were no police helicopter searchlights glaring through my window. The music I heard wafting in the street at night was cultural and lively, not guttural and profane. If I was in a public space, I didn't have to jump every time I heard a loud noise. I didn't have to study the exits. And that pop, 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 pop I heard every night was fireworks, not gunshots. Most important of all, I got to put down the psychological burden of because I'm Black. Because I'm Black. If service was slow in the restaurant, if I didn't get served what I ordered, if I got seated far away from everybody else, if someone cut in front of me in line, if I didn't get the contract, if someone was just nasty to me, I no longer had to ask myself, is it because I'm Black? You never know how heavy a burden is until you put it down. And after a lifetime of the blessings, but also the burden of being Black in America, I just got to be human. Eventually, I did what I always do. As I transformed my life, I invited others to transform theirs. I started a travel vlog called the Puerto Vallarta Viewpoint. And more than one person who actually moved to Vallarta told me that it was in large part my Pied Piper's call that brought them to that peace. When the pandemic hit, I spent it strolling the Malecon or sitting on the beach. I was taking hot baths in luxury hotels that I could only dream of before, like for pennies on the dollar. With all the Canadians trapped in Canada, Mexico was trying to keep everybody in the country that they could. And residency was like almost yours for the asking. And you better believe I asked for it. In every way, Mexico gave me the peace of knowing I had a home. I was home. And when you have like real peace, other things become possible, like belonging. Who would have thought that the global pandemic that made solitude a way of life for most of the world would open my door to belonging? During the pandemic, the firm that I worked for, that I did my investigations for, lost its biggest federal contract. So I had to cut my living expenses by 50 or 60%. I moved out of my lovely apartment and rented an Airbnb in a colonia called PTL. Now, at the time, PTL was rumored by expats to be the poorest and the most dangerous colonia that was anywhere near the expat community. Have you ever bought something from Amazon with terrible reviews and found out it was perfect for you? Have you ever been warned not to do something and did it anyway, and it was like the best thing you could have done? How many times have you been told something was bad and discovered that it was good when you followed your own mind? It was in PTL, this poor community, that I discovered the wealth of Mexico, the real wealth of it, which is its people. It wasn't that, my landlord was my friend. It was more that my friend happened to be my landlord. We're still friends. His mother served me my first bowl of pozole, which is a staple Mexican soup. Knowing that I was by myself in Mexico, the entire family embraced me. And in fact, I brought in New Year's Eve 2021 with them, surrounded by their family joy. There's a small little cafe-like restaurant on the ground floor of the building. And after a few visits, whenever I walked in, the owner would smile and just start fixing my favorite salad. It's called a love salad: spinach, fresh strawberries, and homemade balsamic. Her daughter would change the music and put on American music. These were small things, but it's the small things sometimes, Belonging is not necessarily a grand gesture. Sometimes belonging is just being seen. When the pandemic ended, I discovered that charming open-air restaurant across the street from me was also a 7 nights a week open-air karaoke bar. You have not lived until you have heard tequila-soaked Mexicans singing American country music songs at 2:45 in the morning. It was time to move. I moved several times after that, but always to Mexican colonias rather than expat communities. And everywhere I went, I was embraced and welcomed. Everywhere I went, I belonged. And then it happened again. That thing. The end of the pandemic created a tidal wave of remote workers and digital nomads. My quirky little village was fast becoming a top-tier global destination. Suddenly, there was this wave of young Americans coming in, and a new community was forming very quickly. And I was glad, while forever grateful for the embrace of the Mexican communities. Shared history means deeper connections. I declared I would belong. So as the young expat community in Puerto Vallarta was growing, there were more and more of these public events. Hey, stop by this beach club, and hey, we're gonna be at this restaurant kind of thing. And I went to one or two of them and met some nice people and chatted, but just chatted, And then one day I got an invitation to go to a private gathering at someone's home. And I liked this woman. So I accepted, and I was excited because I was gonna find my tribe, right? I get there, there's about 15 women up on this fabulous rooftop. Hostess wasn't there, she was down in the kitchen cooking. So if you know me, I always have a purse, preferably one that matches my shoes. It is who I always have been. It is who I always shall be. So I walk in and I'm, saying hi to people, and someone says, "Why don't you put your purse down?" Well, I cracked a joke. Yeah, I'm a New Yorker. New Yorkers never put their purse down. Ha ha ha. But I was like, okay, Eraka, chill. Put your purse down. I'm walking around and, hey, how you doing? My name's Eraka, da 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 da. So a few minutes later, I go back to get my phone out of my purse and it's not there. I check everywhere that I've been, and when I was sure that it wasn't where I had been, I stood in the middle of the patio and I said, "Excuse me, I can't find my purse." Silence. Not, "Well, where did you leave it?" Silence. And after about 3 seconds, someone I had literally just met reached under her chair and pulled out my purse. And everybody bust out laughing. I knew what this was. I've been here before. One woman literally followed me around and kept insisting that I listen to a song on her phone. And it was some blues thing like, the title like, "My Daddy Ain't Got No Sugar." I wasn't in the mood for it. And I was like, send me the link. I'll listen to it later. At some point, she puts this song on like the Bluetooth. And I liked it. It was really cool. I think it was an early song done by, not Aretha, but somebody like that who came to be known for music other than that. Right around that time, the owner came upstairs with some food, and she's listening to it, and we're standing by the speaker, and she looks at me, and I look at her, and we're like, yeah, it had kind of a 50s groove. So she does a little thing, and then she goes back downstairs, and I do a little thing, and I'm like vibing to the music. And as I turn to my left, everybody on that rooftop is gathered into this tight little cluster watching me. And as I turn and look at them, they all bust out laughing. I walked over to my purse, put my phone in it, zipped it, and one by one, I went to each one of them. I looked in their eyes and I said, "Goodbye," and then I hugged them, every last one of them. Nobody spoke, nobody moved. Went to the hostess, said, thanks for having me, I'll see you later. She's like, because the food hadn't even been served yet. She's like, "You're leaving?" What? I was like, "I'll tell you later." I go downstairs and I get on Falcon, put on my helmet, the whole nine, and I look up at the rooftop, and sure enough, they're all lined up, looking over the edge to watch me leave. That was years ago, like literally. And since then, I have seen some of them, genuinely glad to see them, embrace, "How you doing, so-and-so," eating together, drinking together, line dancing together, for real though, from the heart. No drama, because that incident wasn't about them. It was about me. That which is for you cannot be kept from you, as long as you move in alignment with who you are and what you intend. That which is not for you will never be granted to you, no matter your alignment with self or intention. My lifetime of solitude was karmic. And if it's karmic, that means it is tied to my purpose. It was my solitude during childhood. It was my solitude after Howard. It was my solitude in Cumberland. It kept me in constant introspection. And it was that constant introspection that enabled me to develop transformational processes. Yeah, I was outside the circle, and that was where I was supposed to be. When you find yourself outside the circle, you have a choice to make. You can water down your self-concept to make yourself more acceptable, or you can fire up a self-concept that is not dependent on external validation. Now, if you've ever found yourself outside the circle, you know that watering down thing is the easiest to embrace. But the reason it's easier is because it's easier to believe that something is wrong with us, that we're flawed, right? I mean, after all, we are the only constant in our lives. Well, while there are lessons to be learned and feedback to receive and adjustments to be made based on your interactions with other people, the impact of other people's responses to who you are on your life is a choice. It's always a choice. I choose fire. I've always chosen fire. I choose to forge the truth of who I am and let everybody else take responsibility for how they respond to that, even if it means solitude. My cultural journey tested my cultural consciousness, and I passed that test. My personal journey tested my mental consciousness, power of my mind to create my reality, the empowerment piece, and I passed that test. But the cultural and the personal were external realms. This was testing my spiritual consciousness. That self-concept that I had forged with fire was being tested by water. One of those periods of really truly belonging were my years with the Spiritual Empowerment Center in Baltimore, Maryland. SEC was a center for spiritual living and subscribed to the Science of Mind approach to spirituality. Shout out Science of Mind. Once I understood that my solitude was karmic and that it was tied to purpose, and knowing that there's no such thing as chance or circumstance in a universe that is ruled by divine law and order, I understood that that incident happening that way was the universe telling me, you got work to do. I understood that that incident was intended for me to raise my spiritual consciousness. And I spent the entire year using my personal process of spiritual transformation. I was complete. I was so happy and so peaceful and so free. The space in my soul that had been created by real peace and real freedom started to fill with the real call to return to purpose. And on September 25th of 2023, my birthday, I announced on Facebook that on October 12th, I was going to do Claim Your Power. I was streaming it so that peeps in the States and around the world just I could just share this power that had led me to craft this beautiful life. And on Wednesday, October the 11th, I went on Facebook and said, unsave the date. My return to purpose had literally been blown away. And blown away by winds maxing at 140 miles an hour. I thought I had passed the test, but the fact is, the test hadn't even started yet. Join me next week for episode 4 of Journey to the Mountaintop. Walk with me.